There were three of us when we went in. I remember that clearly because we counted ourselves more than once, like saying it out loud might keep the number fixed. Me, Mark, and Evan. 3 packs, 3 headlamps, 3 voices talking over each other in the car as the road narrowed and the trees closed in. It was Evan's idea to camp that weekend. He always needed to get away from people for a while. We liked places with no cell service, as if the absence itself was proof of something. Mark and I didn't care either way. We said yes. The trailhead sign was old and half peeled. The map sun-bleached into something almost abstract. No warnings, no dramatic language. Just distances and elevation gains printed by someone who assumed the forest would always behave. Evan took a picture of the sign before we started walking. I remember thinking it was odd. He didn't usually document things. When I asked him why, he shrugged and said, "Just in case." We didn't ask what he meant. The first few hours were normal. Birds, wind in the branches, the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel. Evan walked ahead, like he always did, humming under his breath. Mark complained about his back. I told him he overpacked. He said I underpacked. The usual roles. We reached the clearing by late afternoon. It wasn't on the map, but it was perfect. Flat ground, ring of stones from someone else's fire, a stream just far enough away to hear but not see. The kind of place you assume has always been there and always will be. Evan stood at the edge of the trees for longer than necessary, staring into them. "You good?" Mark asked. Evan nodded, but he didn't turn around. That was the first time I noticed it, the way he listened. Not like someone trying to hear a sound, but like someone waiting for one. We set up camp. Tent, firewood, dinner from foil packets that tasted like smoke and salt and nothing else. The light thinned faster than I expected. The woods went from green to black in layers, as if something were being lowered over our heads. Evan didn't eat much. "You sick?" I asked. He shook his head. "Just not hungry." Mark laughed. "You're always hungry." Evan smiled at that, but it didn't reach his eyes. He kept looking past us, into the trees. I told myself it was nothing. People act weird in the woods. Silence makes room for thoughts they don't usually fit. Night settled in fully. The fire popped. The stream whispered. Insects clicked in rhythms that felt deliberate, like a language I couldn't quite parse. That's when Evan said it. "Did you hear that?" Mark and I stopped talking. I listened. There was nothing new. Just the same sounds, the same forest doing what forests do. "I don't hear anything," I said. Evan frowned. "It stopped." "What stopped?" Mark asked. Evan didn't answer. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the dark beyond the firelight. "Evan," Mark said, sharper this time. "I thought I heard someone walking," Evan said. "Not an animal, a person." Mark snorted. "Out here? At night?" Evan shrugged. "Could be another campsite." "There aren't any marks nearby," I said. "I know." We waited. Nothing happened. After a while, Mark started talking again, louder than before, like volume alone could push the thought away. Evan eventually relaxed, or pretended to. The fire burned down the coals. We crawled into the tent sometime after midnight. I lay there listening to Mark's breathing even out. Evan's didn't. It stayed shallow, uneven. Every so often he shifted, the fabric rustling softly. At one point, I felt him sit up. "Evan," I whispered. He leaned close to my ear. "I can hear it again." "What?" "Footsteps." I held my breath. There was nothing, just the stream, the insects, my own pulse suddenly loud. "You're dreaming," I said. "I'm not asleep." He stayed like that for a long time, listening. Eventually, he lay back down. I didn't sleep much after that. Morning came, gray and damp. Fog hung low between the trees, thick enough to mute distance. Everything felt closer than it should have. Evan was already awake, sitting on a log by the cold fire pit when Mark and I crawled out. "He didn't wake us," Mark said. Evan didn't look at him. He needed the rest. He looked tired, worse than tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy all night and never put it down. "What did you hear?" I asked quietly. He glanced at me just for a second. "I don't want to talk about it." We packed up slower than planned. The fog didn't lift. It clung to the forest, swallowing depth, making everything feel staged, like we were walking through a set with too few details. We decided to hike to the overlook before heading back. It was only a few miles. Evan hesitated when Mark suggested it. "We should just go," Evan said. "Head back." Mark laughed. "We just got here." Evan opened his mouth, then closed it, and he nodded. The trail narrowed as we climbed. Roots crossed the path like veins. The trees grew closer together, their branches knitting overhead. At some point, the fog thinned enough to see patches of blue sky, and the forest brightened. That's when Evan stopped. "There," he said, pointing off the trail. I followed his finger. I didn't see anything unusual, just trees, shadows. "What?" Mark said. There was someone standing there. Mark rolled his eyes. "You're messing with us." "I'm not." "You're tired," I said. "Your brain's filling in gaps." Evan shook his head. "No." They moved when you looked. I felt a chill then, sharp and unwelcome. "Let's keep going," Mark said. "We're almost there." Evan didn't move. I walked back to him. "Evan, look at me." He did. His eyes were wide, unfocused, like he was still looking at whatever he thought he saw. "Nothing's going to happen," I said. Not sure who I was convincing. He took a breath. "Okay." He stepped back on the trail. The overlook was empty, just rock and sky and a view that should have been breathtaking. I felt nothing. Mark took pictures. Evan stood at the edge, staring down into the trees below. "We should head back," Evan said again. Mark sighed, but agreed. We didn't notice he was gone right away. It happened on the descent, where the trail twisted and dipped, where the forest grew dense again. Mark was ahead. I was behind Evan, or I thought I was. I remember looking down to watch my footing, stepping over a root, then looking up to say something to him. The space behind Mark was empty. "Evan?" I called. No answer. I jogged a few steps forward. "Mark, stop!" Mark turned, annoyed. "What? Where's Evan?" Mark glanced behind him, then around us. His expression shifted, irritation, draining into confusion. He was right there. We stood still, listening. Nothing. We called his name once, louder than shouting. The forest swallowed it all. "He probably stepped off to pee," Mark said, forcing a laugh. But his eyes didn't match his tone. He waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. I walked a few feet off the trail, calling. The fog had thickened again, though I didn't remember it rolling back in. Trees looked different from this angle, too similar, like the forest had fewer unique features than it should. "Evan!" Mark shouted. Something echoed. It wasn't his voice. He froze. The sound was wrong, too flat, too delayed. "Did you hear that?" Mark whispered. I nodded. It came again, closer this time, a voice, maybe, but stretched thin, pulled out like tape, played too slowly. It might have been Evan's name, or it might have been nothing, shaped by distance. "That's not him," I said. Mark swallowed. "We should find him." We split up for all of 30 seconds before panic pulled us back together. Every direction looked the same. The trail itself seemed less defined, as if we were trying to blend back into the forest. We shouted until our throats hurt. We listened until silence felt heavy. No weapon. We backtracked. We searched the area where he'd last been. We found his footprint near the edge of the trail, half smudged, pointing towards the trees. That's it, Mark said. He went this way. The woods closed around us almost immediately. The ground dipped, branches snagged our clothes. The air felt colder. Evan, I yelled. Something moved to my left. I turned too fast and nearly fell. It was just fog. Shifting. But I could have sworn it moved away from me. Mark stopped suddenly. Do you smell that? I did. Something metallic, like wet pennies. There, Mark said, pointing. On the ground was Evan's pack. It was upright, resting against a tree. Zippers closed. Nothing spilled, like it had been placed there carefully. He wouldn't drop it, I said. Mark picked it up. It was heavy, full. He wouldn't go anywhere without this. We stood there, the forest silent in a way that felt intentional. Evan, Mark said quietly, this isn't funny. No answer. The light shifted. I realized with a jolt that we'd been searching for hours. The sun was lowering, shadows stretching. We need help, I said. We need to go back. Mark hesitated, staring into the trees beyond the pack. But what if he's still out there? What if we get lost too? I snapped. That decided it. We marked the tree with a strip of cloth from Mark's sleeve and forced ourselves back toward the trail. It took longer than it should have. The forest resisted us in small ways. Paths that dead-ended, slopes that looked navigable until they weren't. By the time we found the trail again, it was nearly dark. We ran, but at the clearing, Evan's tent was still there, unzipped, empty. Mark sat down hard by the fire pit and put his head in his hands. I don't understand, he said. He was right there. I didn't answer. I was staring at the woods, half expecting to see Evan standing at the edge waiting for us. He never appeared. We spent the night huddled by a fire we kept too big, calling his name into the dark, listening to the forest answer in sounds that were almost familiar. Once I thought I heard footsteps. I didn't say anything. At dawn, we hiked out and found a ranger station miles down the road. They called it in. Search and rescue came. Dogs, volunteers. They searched for days. They found nothing. No tracks beyond the pack. No torn clothing. No signs of a struggle. The forest, according to the report, was unremarkable. They asked us questions, the same ones, over and over. Did Evan have a history of mental illness? Was he under stress? Had he mentioned wanting to disappear? We said no. Eventually, they stopped searching. Life moved on, the way it always does when it isn't the one that went missing. Mark and I stopped talking for a while. Not intentionally, it just became easier not to. Sometimes late at night I think about that first evening, about Evan standing at the edge of the trees listening. I wonder what he heard. I still camp occasionally. Not deep woods, never without cell service. Sometimes, when the wind is right and the forest goes quiet all at once, I hear something that sounds like a footstep, stomping just out of sight. I don't look. We went in as three. We came out as two. And somewhere out there, there is a place in the woods where Evan stopped being counted.